also make an announcement.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thanks. Welcome, welcome everyone. We're letting folks in. Give us a moment. Great to see you all. Hello, hello. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. I believe that we'll probably have people joining us over the course of our meeting today. So want to be mindful of time. My name is Chelsea Andrews, and I'm the Executive Director for Everyone Home. Welcome and thank you for joining this particular meeting in regards to our point in time count. You all are here because you recognize the importance of ensuring that we get an accurate count in regards to our youth, the most vulnerable, and our future in regards to ensuring that we know what their needs are, as well as we're able to properly capture what our youth count looks like. This is something that requires a certain level of expertise, and I believe we have the right people in the room. There's a lot of unknowns and variables that we have to consider and think about in terms of how we get this count right. As you all may know, our county just received from HUD $6.5 million for the Youth Homeless Demonstration Project that will be rolling out next next spring. And one of the key components for how to utilize those funds will be looking at our youth count and looking at what the count tells us about our needs. So this is extremely important, and we also have the resources lined up and ready to go once we're able to make some determination on how best to allocate those resources. So thank you for joining us today. I'm going to hand it over to Katie Haverly on my team, who will introduce herself, and will also introduce the rest of the planning committee as we get into the good work of figuring out how best to ensure that we get the proper youth count for our upcoming PIC count. And with that, Katie.
Thank you, Chelsea. Welcome, everyone. Thanks to everyone for taking time to join us today. Just wanted to take a moment before we get started to introduce our planning team for this year's point in time count. So you heard from Chelsea Andrews. She is our Executive Director of Everyone Home. We are a partner in this process. My name is Katie Haverly. I am the Director of Research and Data Analytics for Everyone Home, and I will turn it over to my colleague, Tirza.
Hi, thank you, Katie. I'm Tirza White. I am the Senior Director for Performance Improvement and Data Analytics at Everyone Home. And I will turn it over to Kathy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kathy Barco. I am with Aspire Consulting LLC, and I am one of the project managers that is working on the point in time count and youth count this year. And you will be hearing much more from me later on in our agenda. Thank you for being here. And next up, we'll shift to our other research partner and team from Applied Survey Research. Peter, I think I see you on, but you might be muted. There we go.
Thank you, Kathy. This is Peter Connery with Applied Survey Research, and I'm also on the project team and helping with the PIT count logistics. And I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Julie, who will be with us as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Burr, and I'm a research analyst with Applied Survey Research. Excited to be here and be working on this effort with everyone.
Great.
Not sure who should be next.
Thanks, Julie. So we also have project partners of Alameda County Housing and Community Development and Alameda County Healthcare Services Agency Office of Homeless Care and Coordination that are involved in this planning team that have been part of this process from the beginning. So just a little bit of housekeeping for our meeting today. Everyone is automatically going to be on mute. And just so you know, this meeting is being recorded for note-taking purposes and to actually share with the community for those who could not attend. We will be sharing the recording and all the materials on the Everyone Home website after the meeting is finished. If you have questions, please place them in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat You can also raise your hand using the raise hand function. And we will have Q&A sections as part of our day today to ensure that your questions are answered. Again, all the materials will be posted on our website and emailed to those that RSVP to the event today. And just to give you a sense of what is upcoming, we have another community meeting happening next Monday from 12 to 2 that is focused on outreach participation and guide recruitment. If you are involved with an outreach program, we really hope that you can join us to discuss this very important part of the count. Today is our 4th community meeting in our series regarding this point in time count. As we move into December and January, we will have more focused meetings on specific topics related to the topics you can see on the screen here. Once I jump off here and switch over to Kathy to take over, I'm going to put some links in the chat for the upcoming meeting on Monday. But for now, I will turn it over to you, Kathy.
Well, thank you everyone for being here in this important youth count planning session. This is our first meeting specifically targeted to the youth count, and you'll hear a little bit more about that and what it's going to entail, and certainly how to plug in and make sure that we have accurate funding basis to understand what our dynamics are, what our counts are, as much as we can about that youth population to help inform planning. I understand many of you have been marathoning it today in youth meetings back to back. So thank you for taking a short break and hopping back on with us for this critical conversation. As I was perusing the participants list, I see so many people that were part of this effort in 2019, which was our last count. So nice to see you all back here. We had great participation at that juncture for the 2019 count, and we look to have that again for the 2021 count. The first thing I'm going to start us off with, however, is a virtual sign-in sheet. If we were in a meeting in a room, we'd have a sign-in, we'd have a little bit more of an opportunity to get to know all of you who are here and think about how what type of expertise we have in the room and how to kind of best connect and plug that into our content. So I put a Google form in the chat. If you are at your computer, if you can click on that and sign in for us and respond to the questions that are there about what type of services you provide. If you are on the phone and can't otherwise get to the Google form, just please respond in the chat with your name and your organization and your email address. Those that just joined, I'm putting the link back in the chat again. Got 5 responses. We'll give it a little bit more time here. I'll give one more minute. They're still trickling in. Thanks to those of you hopping in on chat with your introductions. Glad to have you here. Right, here we go. We got 23 responses so far. If you are continuing to fill out the form, please do that. We see that most people, the majority are flying here solo. A few have some tag teaming going on with 2 people from more than one organization. Most of our organizations do direct service work for youth and young adults. Was 57%, and about a quarter of them do not do direct service. We've got the YAB members in the house, and we also have some people who are kind of tangentially related to that work in other partnerships, and others that serve a wide range of age groups, and some of that, a small percentage of young adults. We've got representation from, oh, another one just popped in, Alameda, Albany, Berkeley, Dublin, Emeryville, Fremont, Hayward, Livermore, Newark, Oakland, Piedmont, Pleasanton, San Leandro, the unincorporated area, and Union City. Literally every jurisdiction in the county we got representing on the call here today. So that is great news for us in terms of thinking ahead and planning. And then the question was asked, what does your program primarily serve in terms of people who are living in what type of living arrangements? So about a quarter, almost 28% serve youth and young adults who are living in shelters, and about 17% living in unsheltered situations such as cars, RVs, abandoned buildings, encampments, on BART, other transit and unsheltered locations. And then one person said their youth live primarily in unstably housed places, youth living from place to place or in doubled up situations, some all of the above, a few all of the above, as a matter of fact. And then 62% of those who are in the meeting today on this Zoom operate an outreach program. These pieces will really be helpful in helping us as we think about where people can plug in, pieces about the sheltered count, about the unsheltered count. So thank you for taking the time to help, particularly the ASR team and myself, get a little sense of who's in the room as we can tailor our conversation here as we're thinking about youth count pieces. I am going to do a very brief overview of youth count to get us going here. And let me get in full screen mode here. All right. The goal of today's meeting really is to have opportunity for you all to give some input about what is the most responsive methodology for our unsheltered youth count. And in order to do that, we had a little bit of get to know you from the youth organizations that are participating. I will do a brief overview of the purpose of the point in time count and the youth count. I will talk a little bit about the structure that was used for the 2019 youth count. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time in item number 4, talking about enhancements, options for methodology. Peter will be leading that section and really helping us have a more interactive conversation and dialogue about what the recommendations from this group are about how to have an inclusive and just well-functioning youth count. And then we'll talk about ways to get involved, highlight some of the next steps that are there as we wrap up, and we will have you out of here on time at 4 o'clock. So here we are, point in time count overview. For those of you who are not familiar, the point in time count is a requirement by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that requires communities to conduct a point in time count, a snapshot of individuals, youth, and families who are experiencing homelessness. So we get that count or enumeration, and then to also provide some accompanying data about that group of people, including some demographic information like their age, cohorts, gender, race, ethnicity, and family status, as well as some other information about their circumstances. How many are veterans? How many are in family households? How many are experiencing chronic homelessness? And what, if any, disabling conditions do people have? This data is used extensively throughout Alameda County in everything from grant writing from our nonprofits and community partners, all the way up to the state and up to the federal level for report writing and funding allocations. Locally, we refer to the point in time count as Everyone Counts. That is our local name for that. And this year we will be conducting that count on January 25th. It is required to occur in the last 10 days of the month. And then once we gather that enumeration, then we have all of our work due back to HUD by somewhere in the April-May area. We do not yet have the deadline for when data will be due to HUD, but it typically historically has been in that March, April, May window. Normally, we would have had a homeless count in 2021, in December of 2021, and January of 2021. And those of you that can remember back, remember we were still in Alameda County in very significant COVID surge at that time, coming off of Thanksgiving and December holidays. We were extremely high numbers, high hospitalizations, of course, high death rates. And with everything that was going on, our outreach programs and our sheltering programs, and with the new COVID shelters, everybody was just stretched very, very thin. And HUD allowed an option for a waiver for all communities across the country. And most Bay Area counties, including Alameda County, opted out for a waiver. So we know that folks are extra anxious for this data, since it'll be 3 years by the time the data comes out that we're having kind of a refreshed data set. The point in time count asks us to specifically enumerate how many people are sheltered, living in sheltered situations, as well as those that are unsheltered. And the type of living situations that are included are listed here. On the unsheltered side, everything from those literally directly sleeping outside, in tents and encampments, makeshift shelters, in their vehicle, in RVs, bus stations, but also sheltered locations such as emergency shelters, DV programs, transitional housing programs, and inclement or winter shelter programs and safe parking. What it does not allow us to include is people who are staying place to place and couch surfing, folks who are doubled up or living in overcrowded conditions, people who are in mental health facilities or rehab facilities or jail, even if they were immediately homeless preceding their admittance into those types of facilities. This very narrow look of homelessness is particularly impactful when we're thinking about a youth count and youth homelessness. Oftentimes, youth are not living for long periods of time in one of the living situations that are included in the count. We know they tend to have more fluctuation of their living situation. And so in the point in time count, it really is intended to look at who is in a literally homeless situation by this particular HUD definition on the night of January 25th. The values locally that we have been using in our planning is to really have very reliable and accurate data that is federally compliant, that is safe for all people, particularly in this COVID environment. Helps us to better understand the situations of people experiencing homelessness and to be able to produce data that helps inform our efforts. We want to make sure that we are protecting the high risk of COVID transmission as we are doing this work. We are also looking this year to expand the level of city-specific information that we are generating as a part of the count work, and building in racial equity into more and more places of our count, as that is a very high priority here in Alameda County. We're also making some expansions to use technology that are helping us to support our field work. So we'll have electronic apps that we are using, as well as other electronic and technological tools. And part of the purpose of those technological tools is to hopefully help expedite the production of report data so we can get data out in people's hands a little bit faster. And then lastly, we know that because of everything going on with all of particularly the COVID environment and our partners that are providing services and the quickly changing landscape of that we need to be very just nimble and fluid in our decision making. When we think of the youth count in particular, the values that really stand out is related to item number 1, that reliable data. We want guides to include youth and young adults to really make sure that we have representation as we are doing that level of field work. Number 4, that we really make sure that we are understanding the uniqueness about youth and young adults experiencing homelessness, that we're differentiating our service questions, that we're thinking about things like gender identity and sexual orientation, that we're preparing the data about unaccompanied youth that HUD is representing, but that we're really having a very focused in lens to be able to make sure that all parts of the youth count are very tailored as best we can for youth and young adults. The point in time count has 3 components. A sheltered count, where we are working with the Homeless Management Information System in Alameda County, as well as all programs that even do not use that HMIS system, to get accurate information about people that were staying indoors in sheltered locations on the evening preceding the count. The most probably known part of the homeless count is the visual count, where we are sending teams out into the streets in the very early morning hours and doing a visual enumeration. Part of that visual count, we also have our youth count effort that is typically conducted in the afternoon and or early evening. And then in the 2 weeks that follow the visual count and the survey count, or excuse me, the visual count and the sheltered count, then we have surveys being conducted on a random sample of people experiencing homelessness. And those surveys are conducted by peers, both youth peers and other adult peers. There is a lot of work that goes into the count itself and the survey work. And you see here some of the expansion of some of that work that we are doing now in these months preceding up to the actual day of the count. If you're looking at the very top, some of that pre-work that is a high priority is really the updating and developing of survey questions and planning out the youth count. So that's such a focal part of the work that we are really thrilled that you are here to be able to assist us in that. The new features that we are looking to embed in this year's count are categorized by themes here. In the COVID accommodations, we are currently working with our public health department in Alameda County, who is reviewing some COVID protocols. So we are hoping to have those publicly available in the very near future. But to maximize safety in this work, we will be encouraging teams to sign up to volunteer in the homeless count in their existing social pods. So for example, me and my partner can sign up and take a team, and then we're not exposing anybody else outside of our existing social bubble or social pod. We will be building heavily on outreach teams and using staff of shelters, drop-in centers, and other programs that naturally have that expertise, and also naturally have relationships with people experiencing homelessness to be our guides and our peer component in the work of the count. If you have participated in the past, you know that generally we have launched out from big congregate settings. So we will be eliminating those big congregate settings this year and doing virtual deployment as much as possible, where people will be leaving directly from their homes and heading out to do the work in the very early morning hours for the visual count. I mentioned previously we have new electronic tools that we're very excited about. We have those electronic tools that will help with the sign-up process for volunteers to be able to select from census tracts and areas they want to cover. We will have electronic app that displays the census tracts maps that the volunteers and our guides and outreach teams will be using. And we'll be using those electronic apps for some of the early work that we're doing around unsheltered structures and what are the household configurations in unsheltered structures. I also mentioned cities and having more city-specific data, but we will also be having cities participate and as part of a regional coordination so that we have more eyes on the ground and closer to the work that is being done as an intermediary level between the work of applied survey research and myself. We're really excited about having these regional coordinators that will help with assigning maps and helping with communication and really making sure that every jurisdiction has all of their census tracts fully covered. And then the other areas that are also equally important to us, as I mentioned, are the race and equity focus in this year and really putting that as a central lens in all that we do. Expanding our jurisdictional data that is available city by city about the sheltered count and unsheltered count. Looking at making some improvements for the way that we are capturing unsheltered family homelessness and our youth count data, and getting that data out in a more timely manner. Specific to 2019, as we're drilling in a little bit deeper onto the youth count, what we are referring to in terms of who we are counting is to be able to count and enumerate the extent of unsheltered homelessness as well as sheltered homelessness among unaccompanied children age 17 and under. And by unaccompanied, we mean unaccompanied from a parent or guardian. as well as unaccompanied young adults in the 18 to 24-year-old range, and unaccompanied children and young adults who are themselves parenting their own children. So that really is the focus that we have when we are thinking about our youth count as a whole for the unsheltered and sheltered components. There were 4 facets of our youth count in 2019. The street youth count, where we had youth guides, as well as partners from youth serving agencies to go out as teams into targeted locations where unsheltered youth are known to congregate. Those locations were developed by youth themselves and youth serving organizations. They head out in the afternoon and the evening in January of our point in time count. And those youth guides were paid a cash stipend for the time that they were working to do that enumeration and for their time in training. They had tally sheets, they had maps, they had a screening tool that were used, and those youth guides and their team leads were out into, I think some teams were out well into like 10 p.m. out in these specific locations, getting the enumeration done for that street count part. In addition, we also had counting sites where programs that served youth or young adults had an opportunity and a process in place to consistently ask youth that showed up for those day services that day to essentially do a self-administered count. It was a very specific form that asked about where they had slept the night before in order to assist us in counting youth that we might not otherwise have captured in the youth street count or in the visual count. Youth are also counted in the visual count, so the efforts of the street count and the counting sites were both in addition to the youth that were counted in the early morning visual count that happened. And then, as I have said previously, we had peer youth surveyors that were out doing those youth surveying in the 2 weeks that followed the actual night of the enumeration. For 2022, there's so much enthusiasm for everyone counts for the project. There's certainly an excitement about current data. It seems to people that homelessness has gone up and that the conditions have gotten worse. And so we're really looking at having data that helps us understand that more and to be able to quantify that. And really excited about efforts that bring a little bit more efficiency to this work. At the same time, we know that we have some hurdles and some challenging situations to work with in terms of the really dynamic nature of the pandemic. There is the holiday season coming up upon us, and the big question mark, a big unknown about will we have another surge? Will there be another variant? So we're really committed to being nimble in all of that as we flex and shift and move and pivot as the nature of the dynamic really directs us to. We also understand that for many programs, as well as even for staff of those programs, and perhaps even some of you on this call today, that there has been a lot of pressure put on homeless serving providers since the beginning of the pandemic. And folks are fatigued and overworked and stressed and just kind of chronic anxiety even. And so we know that those are some of those dynamics that we are taking into account as we are thinking about how to really best implement a count, and particularly a youth count. And we will, of course, have everything that we do be compliant with our public health department's advisements. We feel very strongly about that and will not be doing things that are in contradiction to the current health guidance, in in general, and specifically into the input that we're receiving from the public health department about our proposed protocol. So that's the overview of things that we have related to homeless count. We have, this is the first of 3 meetings where we are gathering as a group to really dive in. Today we will be covering methodology. We will meet again, as Katie shared with you, on December 13th in the same time slot to dive a little bit deeper into getting programs plugged in that can assist, and taking a look at some of the pieces of paperwork and of forms, and kind of understanding how that works as a result of things that we are identifying in today's meeting. And then we have a time slotted out, should we need it, in early January for a homeless count strategy session. There will be other activities that are going on to identify the coverage areas where youth are known to congregate, to really train our youth providers and our youth guides in advance of doing that count. So there'll be much more about this. We will formalize this calendar kind of flowing from today's meeting, and make sure to keep you all informed about that as well. So that is as much as we have planned around homeless count. I'd like to open it up now for questions and see what you all want clarified before we move into talking particularly about the 2022 count. Katie, is there anything in the chat that has arisen?
There is not.
I did a pretty high overview because I know some of you have been involved in prior counts. Some of you have been in the first few of Everyone Home's community meetings around this. And some of you may be very new to all of it. So feel free to hop in chat with any questions, or to simply unmute yourself. And we'll be glad to answer questions at this juncture before we move on to our discussion about the 2022 work.
I have a quick unrelated question, if I could ask that.
Sure.
So for the city of Alameda, we're interested in presenting on Everyone Counts to a couple of city groups for the purposes of getting community participation and recruiting volunteers. And was just wondering who I might be able to connect with to maybe get some materials to present, or if somebody would be willing to visit.
The lead for our community engagement is Katie Haverly from Everyone Home. And so that would be your connection there. We are not formally launching our recruitment efforts until more closer to Thanksgiving, as we're continuing to work our way through the methodology. But Katie will be the contact. And Katie, anything else you need to kind of make some connection on this one?
Yeah, hi Veronica, I'm placing a link in the chat where there's a way you can connect with us through our website, and I'll also place my email address in the chat so you can reach out to me. That works.
Thanks. Sorry to take everyone's time on this. It's really appreciated.
No worries. You got it.
Any other questions about methodology or history about the count? All right, Peter. That means it's back over to you.
Okay. Throw those slides up while we do it. Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you all for participating in today's planning and learning session about youth counts. Just giving a little more background as we roll up here. One of the foundations of all of our homeless point in time count work that we assist in and have been doing for 20 some years has been a principle that you need to integrate persons with lived experience into your planning and field effort, logistics effort. And then secondly, another foundational element is that you need to acknowledge that homelessness is not a single experience, in that it represents a really varied experience with tremendous diversity among those that are experiencing homelessness, and that the best counts have outreach strategies which target that diversity and integrate that diversity, those diversity components into the planning. So we very early on in our pit count experience, we identified youth as a group that is commonly undercounted in the typical point in time count, which is done nationally. Most counts are done in the very early morning, and they focus on hot spots where there's encampments or large groupings of persons experiencing homelessness. And not surprisingly, there were commonly not many youth under 25 that were always found in those locations. So we have worked with youth and tried to develop some strategies that represent their lifestyle more effectively. And one of the outcomes of that has been to establish a dedicated youth count that is distinct and complementary to the general population youth count. So in many communities, we found that unaccompanied under 25 persons don't commonly commingle with older unhoused adults. That's especially true in the more urbanized communities. It's less true in the more rural communities. As an example, many of you are familiar with Napa County. We worked with the Napa youth and the Napa homeless community, and they told us that there's very significant integration between the groups of all ages, and you don't need a special youth count. That's not, however, something that we have experienced in Alameda County or in San Francisco and Santa Clara counties, other neighbors for Alameda. One of the other things that we have found in our research is that, you know, the pit counts don't really recognize the unaccompanied under 25 youth experience very well. And that was you know, one of the main reasons there is what Kathy noted in the definition, which was on the point in time count day, you're not considered homeless if you're doubled up. And as many of you know, you know, double up is a very common living situation for our youth who are unstably housed. So if you happen to have some form of stable housing on the night of the pit count, HUD doesn't consider you eligible to be counted on that night. So that's a challenge to profiling the population. So what we have done and what we have found is that we have had successful efforts when we have done some peer-led surveying and enumerating of unhoused under 25 youth in specific targeted areas of the community, which are suggested by the youth and what we call hot spotting efforts. And one of the first things that came out of our peer-led planning efforts was the suggestion that we don't do the pit count in the early morning period. And that's something that we'd like to raise again in 2022 in Alameda and determine the optimal time that we should send our teams out. So, you know, as was noted in 2019, we posed the same question. In the general response we got from most of our youth organizations and the youth that they served was the late afternoon, early evening was the best time. So teams started typically as early as 3, and as Kathy said, you know, some were out there on the street until roughly 10 p.m. But again, for this year, we want to give flexibility to that. And one of the things that we're doing, especially this year, is showing a lot more regional flexibility. So the best time, for example, in the city of Oakland might not be the best optimal time in Fremont or West Valley, for example. So that's something that we want to discern through our planning and logistics session. Another thing that we really feel is important is that the youth should be coordinated, recruited, and planning should happen through the infrastructure of your youth organizations that youth are familiar with and trust, and have the strongest connections with. We think this is really important for both hotspotting and the field work itself. Very commonly, and what was done in 2019 and previously is to put together youth-only teams. So whereas our general population count typically has a team which is ideally a service provider, a person with lived experience, and maybe a community volunteer, the youth teams are 100% youth-led, in that the teams that actually go out on the street are all peer under 25 youth. And then they usually have a youth organizational leader who helps drive them around to their different route areas and provides logistical support for their youth count efforts. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And then the youth themselves help identify those locations to go to. And this is, again, a little different than what we do in the general count, which is, Kathy mentioned, is go to every census tract in the county. On the youth counts, we found that it's more effective to hone in specifically on locations where the youth community tells us there are higher concentrations of unaccompanied youth. And again, the main target of this effort is to enumerate the youth that wouldn't necessarily be found in the morning general population count, where the morning teams at beginning at 5 a.m. go out for their 4-hour period. We're really trying to hone in on those youth that would have been missed during that general count period. Do you want to advance the slide for me, Kathy? So many of you on your sign-up sheet identified that you were with a youth organization, and it was great to see that we had representation from so many city areas. It's not always common for us to have enough youth organizations to get the coverage we need, and it's nice to see that in Alameda County that it appears as though we've got really good geographic representation. So what we're going to be trying to find as we get further into our planning stages that were outlined earlier is recruit organizations that will be able to participate and avail us of a team leader who might be a key coordinating representative for the organization in, excuse me, in a specific jurisdictional or other county area. So this is a description of what that team leader might be responsible for. One would be the recruitment of guides to participate. We offer compensation to all the guides or navigators, as some people refer to them, that will work on the teams, and they'll be paid $20 an hour this time around. So we'll want the team leader to recruit youth to participate in the field effort, and the number of people that you would recruit would really be related to the scope of your area. For example, we'll obviously need a lot more teams in Metro Oakland than we'll need in the city of Alameda or Fremont or Livermore. But we would want you to recruit youth that have a good knowledge of the streets, of the youth lifestyle in those streets, and would be effective navigating and interacting with street youth that they may come into contact with. So other part of that team leader role would be to optimize the assignment of different routes to youth so that they're going to areas where they'll be most effective. We want to make sure that they're keeping an eye out on the safety of the guides. That's both public health safety as well as making safe decisions about interacting with any other youth that they may find on the street and not getting into any dangerous situations. Be a resource for questions that come up during the day, supporting interactions with the guides as they go through their day. We will be using, as Kathy mentioned, a smartphone-based application to document what we observe on our routes. So there could be some questions on how to navigate the smartphone application, and we're hoping the team leader can help with that. And then another role would just be to make sure that everything worked out with the data entry on the smartphone, or if somebody had to use some backup paperwork, that would be something a team leader would help with. And then also respond to any crisis situations that or emergency situations that the team ran into. So that's what a team leader would do, and hopefully, you're already mentally thinking on who in your organization might be able to serve in that role. Very commonly, outreach staff have a great sense for being a team leader, and we hope that your organizations will be able to help arrange and coordinate the transportation of these teams out to their targeted areas. So that's a little description of what the team leader does, and for those of you that are interested, this is sort of a little discussion on what the youth guide or youth navigator would do. And typically we put together teams of 2 or 3 youth that go out with a team leader. It's not uncommon for us, for example, to have a team leader that runs 2 or 3 teams of 2 to 3 persons, and maybe put them in a organizational van and drop a team off at a given intersection with a clear plan on what to cover, and then move on and then drop another team off at another location, and then circle back and pick folks up at a designated time and spot, keeping in touch on the phone as necessary. And then the youth guides will be then asked to identify unaccompanied youth that they run into during their routes. As Kathy mentioned, there's a small screening question to determine that they have an unstably housed situation, and then their visual profile is documented via the smartphone. Once the team leader takes the youth guide throughout their assigned route areas, that typically takes around 4 hours, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. The team leader takes the guides back to home base, wherever that may be, typically at the organizational site, very commonly a shelter site. And then the guides will be paid in cash for their time. And again, they're paid at a rate of $20 an hour. There will be trainings that the guides will get. Most of our point in time count trainings will be online and virtual, though there is a possibility, if it's felt necessary, to do some in-person trainings. But in general, we're trying to do that virtually as much as we can. The smartphone application that we use we'll have a separate training on that. It's pretty straightforward. There only needs to be one smartphone per team that goes out. There's only one documenter, if you will. And our general experience is that the youth are pretty comfortable with these smartphone apps and have been able to navigate its usage very effectively. So, what are some of the next steps? I've outlined, some strategies that have worked, but I want to be, clear with everyone. We don't want to assume that what we're thinking right now is the best way to go. I'm always interested in soliciting and implementing the advice that we get from our youth in these local areas to tell us what they feel the best way to effectively profile unaccompanied homeless youth in their area, and really to document the folks that would be missed in the general count. So we're open to different strategies that will be more effective than what we've outlined. We are presenting, one approach, but as I've mentioned, there's a lot of customization that we can do in identifying where to go, what time, and how we come up with those answers. We'll ask you to educate us into how to best reflect, your local environment in your community and the diversity within your population. Identify youth resource partners. Obviously, we had a great turnout on the signups, and we've covered a lot of geography, but we'll want to include more folks that may, for whatever reason, not been able to come to this session include them in future sessions, or maybe just have a separate one-on-one with them. We'll want help from you in identifying hotspots, locations, coverage areas that we definitely need to go to, and that would have likely been missed in the general count. So that sort of hot spotting for unaccompanied youth under 25 is really important. And then, the other thing for us to do, as Kathy mentioned, is to stay on top of our field protocols, especially in relation to the public health and safety precautions we need to take. And then additionally, especially with the youth, is to ensure that we protect the safety of those that we are attempting to serve and enumerate, and make sure that there's nothing that there's no negative impact to our intervention during the point in time count that the youth who we're working with will have to suffer from. So again, we think that the planning sessions and meetings that we have planned in the coming weeks will help address some of these next steps. But again, though we presented a rough outline of strategies that can work, especially within a HUD context, we want to make sure that everyone understands that there's a lot of room for customization and innovative planning to reflect this population more effectively. So, thank you.
So then, Peter, what would you like then as input from this group as we start thinking about alternate strategies?
So I'd like to, maybe riff on that question slide and see what comments the folks on the call here have as far as what some alternative strategies or any maybe knee-jerk reflections or reactions that you may have to the current plan or the current outline as we've communicated so far, and give us some things to think about and to maybe plan on further investigation. I'd really like to hear from the youth advocates, and how they feel this approach can work, and potentially what a better approach could be. Anyone want to kick us off? Did anybody on this call, I know some people on this call participated in 2019. Do you want to share anything that worked or didn't work from 2019 with the group here? I can share that we didn't we go through a process where we attempt to deduplicate youth count results from the general population count results. And there's a lot of folks that got eliminated in that duplication effort. And it's something we want to try and avoid if we can in 22, and hopefully find more unique experiences during our youth count. So anyone who has any tips on how to do that would be great.
Good afternoon. My name is Arlene, and I'm a community member not affiliated with any organization. I was wondering, I see a lot of large organizations, cities, and I was wondering about the community-based organizations and grassroots organizations. Is there any outreach to those organizations? Because there's several of them that I know about that work with youth in this age group, but I don't see them on here. And I was wondering if there has been any outreach, because they know the local areas and their people know the local areas. And it would be great because they could also give input on where to go to search out this particular population that you're looking to enumerate, as you said. Thank you.
Arlene, thank you. Exactly. That's exactly the type of direction we're looking to get to. We particularly piggybacked on the youth experts, all in YHDP planning efforts, and really trying to build from there. But you are pointing out a very valuable piece of expertise that is missing really in those grassroots and other types of organizations. If you know of other groups that you're like, why aren't they on here? They need to be part of this. I'd ask you right now to pop those in the chat. And if you have a name of a person at that organization, even better. And like, I'll put some stars and some love and hearts and appreciation. If you got organization name, contact person, and their email address would be primo. But even if just you don't have email, then organization name and person would be very helpful to us. And then we will reach out and make sure that we're including those in that next planning session that is happening on December the 13th.
Yeah, Arlene, I'd like to second that comment. And that's one of the shortcomings we have as a group, is that we don't know all of these informal and local community organizations or efforts. And you're absolutely right that there's some churches and some individuals that do things out of their garages and basements and in their neighborhoods that target youth on a regular basis that aren't part of any formal list of service providers. So those kinds of contacts are rich and something we need.
I would like to say that I know that there's HIV education groups that go out on the street, and they are the ones that are in the lower economic, like San Pablo and West MacArthur, and there's several I can think of, but when I do think of their names, and I don't know their contact people, but I'll think of their names, I'll email you. But yeah, those people are missing. Those people who are already on the streets, they're not here.
Right. And then what we really need as well is more than just sometimes even getting a name and a number, but helping recruit them, because frequently they're overworked already and they're suspicious of a third party like us that is coming in, and having a local connection is really great to have.
Well, I just made a call to Realize Potential Inc. Darren White, who's here in Oakland, and he has a network because he already is boots on the ground, but he is community-based, more grassroots. And so I put in a call and let him know, before I put his name out here. But yeah, well, I didn't want to offer him up and I didn't know, so I just wanted to make sure. But that's one of the big things. The grassroots organization, first of all, if you don't have resources over X amount of dollars, you're not going to be included in many lists. And so those are the ones that are actually boots on the ground doing a lot of the work. And their people also know the neighborhoods. They
Yeah.
know where the kids are hanging out. They know where they're staying at. They know that they're sleeping in the emergency rooms, and nobody's ever even mentioned that. You know, emergency room, waiting room, because it's a safe place to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Not just adults, children sleep there, youth sleep there too. But anyway, a net really needs to go out to these underfunded, under-noticed, underutilized organizations, really, not just to larger ones that are more publicized. Thank you.
Agree 100%. Thank you for raising it, Arlene. Thank you for being the, kind of first brave one to unmute and hop into the conversation. Thanks to everyone that's sharing program names in the chat. We will certainly be following up with all of those and hopefully see them at the next meeting on December 13th. But please feel also, as Peter mentioned, invite them yourself. If you happen to run into them in another long Zoom day of meetings, invite them to that meeting on the 13th as well. The other point that you brought up that I think is also really useful of who we're like wanting to get plugged into this is not only the grassroots organizations that serve homeless youth, but also those that are adjacent to homelessness. There are the HIV groups that you mentioned, but there are also groups that are going out and looking at sex traffic workers. There's the mobile health clinics that are going out. Some of those we have some awareness of, but that's also another group of organizations that we want to.
Like Missy, I didn't hear anything about human trafficking. And here in Oakland, International Boulevard is the Strip.
Yes.
And so it's nothing but youth there. And so how many of them don't have homes? AC United and Missy and probably Dream Catchers would be aware of it. I don't know if the legal aid organizations are affiliated or if they know anything about it, but human trafficking is a huge population here, and how much of them are without homes? And that's why they're out there being trafficked. So I didn't hear any kind of conversation about that. And that's a big issue.
Dreamcatcher and Missy both participated in our 2019 count, as well as, let me give you some of the other organizations that kind of fall in the category that we're talking about of the other ones. A group called Our Kids, the Reach Ashland Youth Center, the UC Berkeley Suitcase Clinic, the Voices Youth Center, and Youth Uprising. All of those are the ones in addition to the other bigger name ones that folks might be more familiar with, like YAY and Covenant House and the Family Violence Law Center, Social Services Beyond Emancipation, and then certainly All In and the Children's Policy Council. So I think
AC United is an organization that was developed specifically for that. And they're plugged into all of Alameda County's human trafficking, anything that has to do with human trafficking. So that might be someone you might want to put on your list. Because all of them are under Missy, Baywa, Dreamcat, all of them are under AC United. But it's a multitude of Alameda County organizations that some are grassroots and some are large.
Can we get just a reaction to how you all are feeling about us going out and doing a parallel youth count piece? Starting from a very basic level, do the folks on this call feel like that is a critical component to add into our youth count methodology? Our team does, but we want to just check with you, all the experts, to say, do you feel like that this is an important level of work to have a parallel track to make sure that we're reaching as many youth as possible? Deirdre, I see a yes, thank you.
This is Brian from Covenant House. Could you explain, when you say parallel, I'm sorry, I missed that part. What do you mean by that?
We have the visual count teams that go out in the morning that are counting everybody that they see, including youth. And so what I mean by parallel is having an additional component that is specifically youth-led targeting youth. So that's what I'm alluding to, Brian.
You know, what I'd like to know is if during the count, you are giving out information as to how to get housing moving forward, because people who feel like they're just being counted for no good reason kind of stand behind the corner and not participate. But if you have some information like housing is available for you, you can maybe get them to interact a little more robustly.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we don't have housing resources available, and we don't have a component of this where we have kind of service teams that whose job, formal role it is to go around and coordinate services. I will tell you that from my experience, we have training protocol that if any of our people being counted want some additional information, we often end up doing referrals to 211 or to the domestic violence organizations. Those tend to be resources that our guides are trained with to have access there. And then on an informal basis, sometimes our interviewers our youth guides are sharing whatever information they can, or the youth leads that are sharing whatever information they can. But it's interesting and unfortunate, we don't have any additional housing resources to bring along to this effort. When we get to the survey portion of this work, we do give thank you gifts to our respondents for participating and sharing their time and their opinions and their knowledge as part of that survey process. We do not have a thank you gift that goes along with just the being counted process. But for those that do participate in a survey, there is a thank you gift that goes along with that. Some of those things have ranged from $5 BART cards is what we use for our youth in the 2019 count. Sometimes we have $5 to $7 gift cards to Subway or McDonald's or to Rite Aid. But those are the type of things that we use as thank you gifts for those who participate in the survey.
It's generally an observation count rather than an interactive count. And that's just because effectively we need to enumerate the entire county on one short day. And if you were to, if we were to have lengthy interactions on that one day, we just don't think logistically we can cover the ground that's necessary to reach as many folks as we think are out there.
So question again, I'm sorry, it's Brian again. So I've never done this. So if, say, we were counting and we walked through People's Park, you're saying that it's more of a visual of who we feel or who we think is in that age range of 24 and under?
Generally, yeah. And then there's a short screener that we commonly will ask just to verify that with the youth.
So we will be talking to them. Okay. So it's not like just a visual, because when you say visual count, in my head for a second, I thought we weren't going to be interacting with them.
Yeah, the general count is a visual count. In the youth count, we've added this little screener option on because of sometimes the difficulty in age identification.
And then another question is, would a young person, so one of the callers brought up what's going on International Boulevard. Would a young person on International who's being trafficked, does that young person fit the criteria of what you're saying homelessness is? One, and if they fit that criteria, definitely I think a deeper conversation with programs like Missy and Shade and programs like that need to be brought to this conversation, because doing street outreach out there, and we've done outreach out there, that's not the type of situation you want to approach. So you definitely don't want to try to approach one of these young women because you could put them at risk or in danger. And they also will probably not even connect or talk to you because they're being watched.
Well, that's why I brought up AC United and Missy,
Yes,
because
ma'am.
they are very informed about that.
Yeah.
First of all, definitely they would be at risk, and anybody trying to approach them would be at risk. So
Yeah.
I wasn't suggesting that you go out there, but they
No,
would
ma'am, I
be
wasn't
better
saying that you
able.
were.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying that you were. I was wondering
Mhm.
how was the conversation going to be had around them if if they would also be considered a part of the homeless count.
AC United would really be able to, District Attorney O'Malley, AC United, that whole spectrum would be able to give you wonderful statistics that would definitely benefit you.
Okay.
Okay.
What you're bringing up is a portion that Peter alluded to about continuing to develop our fieldwork protocols. And what I heard being said is that certainly the AC United groups, Missy, others should be giving some input into who we're approaching, who we're not, how to make sure that we're keeping people safe. So I have added that onto my list of action items as well as a follow-up.
And like in San Francisco, I'm not speaking about you reaching out there, but they have the transgender district. And so I haven't heard anybody speak about that particular population as well. And so I was wondering, within this count, has there been any outreach to that particular population, because they are a large portion of the homeless?
We have not done any targeted outreach yet to transgender or serving organizations. And so please add that in chat if there are other organizations that you think that we particularly need to be engaging with. Please let us know who that is and we can look at plugging that in as well. We asked in the 2019 survey about sexual orientation and gender identity, in part to help us understand the whole population as a whole, but we also know that that is such a critical part to understanding youth homelessness and young adult homelessness. And so we are expecting to consider including those questions again in the survey portion again this year, so that we do have better information to help us understand to what degree sexual orientation and gender identity are prevalent in the youth population, and then to understand how that kind of matches to service availability and to use it to inform planning for services.
And then one of the things, just to continue with this a little bit, this is why some of the sensitivities that you just mentioned with transgender and victims of sexual trafficking brings up the value and importance of using peer-led enumerators, because like you said, when a peer is on International Avenue, they're going to be able to navigate some of the sensitivities on who to contact and who not to. And we go even further and hopefully have such a peer presence that many of the youth that are on our teams know individuals that they're seeing on the streets, and they have personal relationships either through outreach or through their own personal contacts with the folks that they'll be enumerating, and they'll make safe decisions on their behalf. But what we don't have is we don't have enough of those relationships, and this is why we like to have the team leaders help us recruit as diverse number of guides, and with different characteristics and specialties as we can, to reflect that street diversity that we see.
I'm going to keep pushing us and ask your input on some of our other kind of, as Peter called, rough outline of our thinking at this point for the count. So I saw an very affirmative, everyone, yes, we think we still need the youth count. Does in your opinion, does it make sense to continue doing that in the late afternoon, early evening hours? We'll certainly follow up on youth with this question as well, but just to give us some directionality of our planning, is it late afternoon, early evening, or would you all recommend another time for our youth teams to go out and do that counting work? So let's do the yes, no. Yeah, please, Hannah.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask a clarifying question around the youth count. If there's the direct street outreach in addition to youth serving organizations, like holding space for young people that they may be supporting on that particular day. Because I can see that happening at different times, right? Or if we're talking about like alternative education, right? We have a lot of alt ed schools and, you know, providers in the school systems that support young people navigating houselessness. And so if that is the case, maybe that time happens during the school hours, and then the evening street count or the street count happens during the evening. Does it have to be just one time, I guess, or are there multiple things happening?
Yeah, I would say, you know, Hannah, that's a great point you make. And I really like the fact that you tapped into the school, the students, unhoused students, because that's an area that, you know, is getting a lot of attention now and is a real big issue. And that's a window that we don't know much about. But the short answer to your question is we would like to be able to have flexibility with the time of day that we're sending people out there. The caveat to all of it, though, is that we need to be able to make a case that we're not going to be counting the same people that you know, another youth team is counting, or that general population morning team is going to count. So if you can sell me that, you know, we need to go out to find these people during this window, and they're not going to be found in the morning or by another team, then game on. We're good to go. And then we'll work out those details.
One of the other things that Hannah's comment led me to think about was day programs, not just schools, but other kinds of programs that are in the day, more drop-in center or job focused, or other kinds of service organizations that exist and operate in more of a traditional business hours or a modified business hours. And wanted to ask you all if you thought us working with those organizations as well, with the caveats Peter mentioned about being able to deduplicate, was an area in which we should expose or invest some time into doing that. Peter, do you want to say more about that?
About what exactly, Kathy?
The come and be counted kind of strategy?
Oh, yeah. So we've some of you may remember a few years ago we had a Voices of Youth Count effort in Alameda County, and we piloted an approach where youth service groups that had day service programs that became congregate locations for youth receiving miscellaneous services, whatever those may be, would go to the day service center, the /shelter, and then would potentially be enumerated when they would come to that location. In general, we found that to be fairly successful, but not as successful as some of the field effort work that we had, because we observed that many youth don't go to day service centers and that prefer not to. So we wanted to kind of test that notion with those of you on the call, and we'll do it again when we talk to youth. Do we need to do both? Continue to do both, or would we not need to do the come and be counted center observation with a good outreach effort? What does the team think?
I'm going to defer to the young people in the room. So like the question is, do we engage our youth serving organizations that have day programming in addition to like street outreach efforts? And I see Mishara is in the chat. I'm just gonna read what she wrote. She said, just wanted to reiterate and emphasize the importance of effective communication with LGBTQ and CSEC community. And she is one of our Youth Action Board peer mentors, as well as a youth advocate with the Spark Initiative and East Oakland Youth Development Center.
Well, again, we do have, you know, there are, I'm not sure how many we had, maybe 4 come and be counted locations, or 4 to 6. Kathy, do you remember what it was in 2016 or 2019?
I think that's in the right neighborhood there.
Yeah, but you know, it would certainly, if there's been a number of additional drop-in locations or meetup places for different groups of youth, whether LGBT, Q, CSAC, or any of the other ones that Mishara mentioned, and we could expand to additional sites as come and be counted sites. That would be a strategy that we could certainly consider and implement. Again, this is just a case where we need to be able to keep up with the expanded number of sites that would be effective to be considered these count sites, and have a contact at those locations that would work with us. And we don't even have to staff them. We'd work through the infrastructure of these centers or these groups as they currently are configured.
So I have an advantage. I can see Hannah and I can see a few other people on camera, but wondering from the rest of the group, what do you think about the concept of using like those day centers come and be counted type approach in addition to street counts? Can I get thumbs up or a yes or no in the chat? Yes, no, maybe, depending, whatever you want to answer, but can you provide us some direction around all that? Got some thumbs up? Thank you, Deidre. Others in the chat or on camera?
Well, I think that I would like to put it to my organization to have a come and be counted, because they know people who know kids. And if the kids want to come in and be counted and get it over with, or get sign up for a gift or something like that, our organization would be happy to help.
Appreciate that very much.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in terms of the come and be counted. It offers an opportunity for resource sharing and or like additional support, right? Whereas it sounds like the street count is more visual and doesn't have that component.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
If I could just add on to why I feel it's valuable that we count at the day center things, because I remember being a child and living in a motel and hotel, and my parent, she would have to drop me off to the daycare centers or after school centers, you know, so she can go out and work. And so I think it's very valuable and we can receive a lot of information.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for giving that firsthand opinion. Appreciate it. You speaking up and giving your perspective. I don't see any disagreement with that in the chat. And so, Peter, I think that's a direction from this team then, that we should consider the combo approach.
No, I like that. What I really like is hearing that there's been a real increase in kind of satellite meetup locations where youth of different backgrounds can get together and receive services and, you know, potentially participate in the count, and their voices can be better reflected in our work.
I don't know if you all saw the comment or are watching the chat box, but Amy, I think, is piggybacking on Hannah's comment a little bit too, that the come and be counted approach allows not only the resources, but even some fun stuff at the same time. Some food, some music, flu shots, giveaways, like all of the ways to kind of add an outreach and engagement component as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Are there any, I did mention earlier about students. Are there any homeless student organizations that serve the student population? And this is both for, you know, the community college students, the Laney's of the world, and in other places, as well as some of the higher ed schools that have unhoused students there, because we want to reflect their prevalence as well.
Hello, my name is Barry, youth expert. Currently I work with the Guardian Scholars Program, and we don't necessarily work with homeless students. We work with former foster youth as a way we could, the Guardian Scholars, to figure out a way we can count the homeless youth. Because I know we've seen many come through, but they're not necessarily, we don't mainly work with homeless.
Okay.
That's exactly the value or the beauty of those come and be counted sites. If they work with a whole range of people with different housing statuses, housing situations, it allows us to kind of hone in and identify those that are currently unhoused, as well as also quickly screening out those that already have some housing. So it is a good way to really pull in the youth that might only be using the one or two kinds of programs like Guardian Scholars or some of the other day service programs, but not really be plugged into the formal network of services to young adults. Yes, please, Deidre.
I wish I could see that slide again that said what is homeless and what is not homeless. I know for the state of California, for applying for funds for housing is first. Beyond emancipation, I was on a Zoom call and they defined homelessness as transitional housing for youth under 24, and they have and college students, and a long list of people for under 24. It seems like a conflict that with the federal guidelines that you're going by, but the state guidelines say you are homeless.
This is one of the, let me stop sharing here for a second. That's the wrong screen. You get my my whole mess of things staring at you. There we go. There absolutely is conflict in those definitions. And in particular, for this HUD view, we are required to count only those that meet the definition of unsheltered or sheltered. And so sheltered would be living in a homeless serving program that particularly targets people experiencing homelessness. And those could be emergency shelters, domestic violence shelters. Oakland has community cabins, transitional housing program, even safe parking. And then the winter shelters that often open up when it's rainy or it's cold outside. There also is opportunity to include in this people who are in hotels or motels that are paid for by a program, so a hotel voucher. That all is on the sheltered side. On the unsheltered part of the definition, it is literally people that are living in a place that is not meant for human habitation. And so that is a much more specific list that targets people that are sleeping in outdoor tents, makeshift shelters, in their cars, in RVs. And the definition for this particular count is not consistent with state definitions or even other federal program definitions that would allow youth who are otherwise unstably housed, living place to place. Any of that really cannot be counted in here.
And to further
I'm sorry, but transitional housing could include the tiny homes. They don't have running water and they don't have bathrooms.
Correct.
Okay. So I have clients there. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then to further embellish Kathy's definition, what we're really trying to hone in on and what we can report to HUD is where people are sleeping on the night of the 24th. So to be included in the report to HUD for the pit count, you have to be in this included list on sleeping in a location on the included list for the night of January 24th. If you happen to be, doubled up, staying with a relative on that night of the 24th, and the 6 other days of the week, you might be literally unhoused. The pit count rules say that you're not supposed to be counted, which is frustrating.
It is also where in Alameda County, we're trying to rely on other data sources to help give us a better sense of what the annual homeless count really looks like. And so that's beyond the scope of what we do here. This is literally for the one night only. And even with that limited definition, and with the challenges of finding youth, we know that this is an undercount of youth, that we are not going to be able to get to everyone that is experiencing houselessness on that one night. But what it does do is help us get a trend year over year about whether the work that we're doing is making an impact. Are the numbers going up? Are the numbers going down? And gives us that rich survey data that helps us understand the dynamics of our population and to really look at, where are we having disparities or systemic racism showing up, or how do we prevent homelessness as a result of what we learned in the homeless count? So there are a lot of pieces, even though it is an imperfect methodology, there are still a lot of good pieces of planning data that we get out of it that helps us work together better as a community to try to make an impact. Well, this has been a very valuable use of time, if for nothing else than identifying that we do want to move ahead with a targeted youth count and with an add-on of the Come and Be Counted approach. And then the third big thing that feels really significant here is the extensive list that you all have generated with us of other programs and contact information to add into our outreach efforts and get them plugged in for our next meetings. I have been scanning the chat. I don't think we have any unanswered questions. Katie's shaking her head no, so I think we're good on that. I'm going to move to wrapping us up, but before I do that, I want to give one more opportunity to folks to ask questions if there's anything that is on the top of mind for you right now. All right, we're gonna move on and wrapping up then, and hopefully give you a few minutes back in your day. I know that this time of the day and back-to-back Zooms is a little bit exhausting. So we finished Q&A from chat. I want you all to know how to continue to stay plugged into this work. So Katie, I'd like to ask you to share with us a little bit.
Yes, so I'm actually putting a link in the chat right now. If you are able to visit, there's a section about the pit count and staying informed. You can sign up there. Because we already have all your email addresses from this meeting, you'll be added to our communications list for upcoming, news, information about the count. I'm also, again, putting in the registration link for our next planning meeting, which is around outreach teams and guide recruitment. That's this coming Monday, the 15th from 12 to 2. So if you click that second link, you can go ahead and register for that event. And again, I will also place my email in the chat. If you have any other specific questions or concerns about the count, I can help you with moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. Everyone Home is our local communication arm for everything that is the homeless count. So if you are not connected already or on their mailing list, that is a place that I'd want to encourage you to get connected to that effort. And that will be where you're seeing the meeting invites come from for the youth count planning meetings that are happening as well. We hope to see all of you at the next meeting, which is on December 13th. And Katie has the link in the chat to register. It is the second one on there that has kind of register between the two hash slashes that are in there. And that will get you the opportunity to RSVP for the December session and get the Zoom sign up link. We will also be reaching out to all of the organizations that were mentioned here to invite them to that count as well. And feel free to, as we've said previously, reach out and invite others, bring them into the fold. You can forward on that registration link. You can share your Zoom, invite them to come and sit with you if that's easier, but as much as possible, we want to get those with that youth expertise into the next meeting. That would be ideal. In that meeting, we're going to start going a little bit deeper. So this meeting was really intended to give us some directionality about the methodology and understand what you all thought might work well in Alameda County. And now in the meeting in December, we're going to start going in a little bit deeper. We will have job descriptions for the youth guides and for the team leaders. We will be asking for starting our signups. So asking programs and individuals who want to volunteer to be part of this work to sign up in those appropriate ways. And we will also have other kind of key pieces for your consideration that build on this methodology that we want to make sure are really vetted by the youth providers to ensure that they're targeted and will work well in this particular context. So that will be super duper helpful in that. Oh, sorry, Katie. Thank you for the clarification.
Oh, no worries.
The link that is in the chat is not for the December 13th meeting. It is for the November 15th meeting. So those of you that are outreach providers in particular, that is one of the target audiences for that meeting on November the 15th. It's an open community meeting. All are welcome to attend. And we're going to be focusing in on the role that outreach programs will be playing in the overall count this year, as well as in the youth count. So those of you that do outreach, we're really hoping that you can join us next week as well.
I could interject too here. I'd like to just spin a little bit on what Hannah mentioned about the value of having youth on these calls. So if in these upcoming youth meetings, you have anyone that you work with on a regular basis who is, you know, opinionated and has good street knowledge and can contribute to our discussion, we really like that voice to be heard and integrated into our planning. It really adds a richness, and you know, sometimes you know, just rights us in our thinking on how to make this stuff work. And we need all the real street smart help we can get.
And so that with that, a special shout out to the YAB members that are on our call today. Thank you. Thank you. Really, really appreciate you. High fives, virtual high fives, for bringing that voice here and bringing your listening ears and kind of really helping to think about and shape that. We'll be relying on you more and more as this planning work moves forward. So hope to see you in these upcoming meetings, particularly on the 13th, and as we move on in that trajectory of really getting our planning ramped up into full speed on this youth count piece. And then to close us out, I will give the final word over to Chelsea Andrews.
All right. Well, thank you all so very much. And of course, thank you to Kathy and to Peter for doing the hard work of taking us line by line for every detail that we have to think about here. As you all can tell, this is something that means a lot to our community. It requires us all to work together to think about all the partners and things that we might not come instantly to mind for the planning committee. So this meeting was invaluable. Thank you so much for sharing your connections with us, your time with us. We look forward to continuing to engage. I know that Katie put her email in the chat. I just want to encourage, if you have any revelations or thoughts or contacts between now and the next time we're meeting, almost every Monday here, feel free to reach out and we'll respond accordingly. And then also, just generally speaking, it's more than the count. It's bigger than the count, right? This is about us thinking about how do we connect more meaningfully? How do we address the resource gaps more meaningfully? There are some additional resources coming to our community that will help not only our youth, but also the organizations that are helping our youth. So we need to connect as meaningfully as possible with any and everyone who's touching our youth who are experiencing homelessness, and get them connected with the work that we're doing. So thank you all so much for your time. Everyone, please stay safe and be well. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.